This thing and we're going. Okay. So welcome to the 4 o'clock version of the Global Lacrosse Summit. We've got LIU Sharks head coach, Eric Wolf. Eric, thanks for joining us. Just got some housekeeping. Need to thank some sponsors first. Apex Lacrosse Events, Major Series Lacrosse, Sticks and Picks Podcast, Uncommon Fit, the Franklin Parr Team, Bear Paw Lacrosse Events, and Manitoba Lacrosse. So, Eric, welcome aboard. Thanks for stepping in and having a kind of a fireside chat minus the fire.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to see you.
You too. So, Eric and I've got a pretty decent relationship. We go back a few years now. We've got an involvement together, a mutual involvement with Israel Lacrosse, and probably a mutual appreciation for coaching and education, learning, trying to get better, talking about players quite a bit. But Eric, why don't you give the attendees a little bit more on your background, how you got into coaching, where you started, and what your path looked like?
Yeah, I'm from Long Island. I went to Baldwin High School, which is a public school down here. And then I played lacrosse at the University of Albany for Coach Scott Marr. I graduated from there in 2007. We had a pretty good run. We made 3 NCAA tournaments, and my senior year, I think we were number 2 in the country at one point. So we had a good run. I think we beat 3 out of the 4 teams in the Final Four that year as well. So we had a great senior year. That was awesome. And lacrosse has always been a huge part of my life. And when I was graduating, I remember Coach asking me what I wanted to do, and I was like, I want to be around the game. I can't imagine doing anything else. So I told him I was thinking about coaching, and he eventually offered me a position. I helped him out in the office that summer. He offered me a position, created one, just director of operations, which is basically like an internship in coaching. I got to work with the staff and see everything in the office behind the scenes. Can't really work directly with the players, but you get to see everything, and I got a taste, which I'm forever grateful for, to Coach Marr for giving me my start really twice. And then so we had a decent year that year, and then the next year I was able to get my coaching start officially at Siena College. So I coached there for 3 years under Coach Brian Brecht, who is now the head coach at Rutgers. I'm forever grateful for Brian for giving me my start there. Then I had the opportunity to go back to Albany to work with Coach Marr, and got to coach the Thompsons and that whole thing, which was awesome. So I was there for 4 years, and we got the program going back on track, and we had some success there. And then 2 years after that, I coached at Harvard University, which was great. Some awesome experience in the Ivy League and being around some good people and some good coaches, which provided me my next opportunity to go to LIU Post down in Long Island at the Division II level, where I became the head coach, and I've been there ever since. And I just finished up my 3rd year.
So back to your playing days. It said championships. What did you do 3 and 4 years there?
NCAA tournament. So we won the conference championship 3 out of 4 years, and we got to go to the NCAA tournament 3 out of 4 years.
So what did the tournament experience do for you at the time as a player? Because it's obviously exciting to be in the tournament, but I'll make that a 2-part question. Exciting as a player. What were your thoughts on it? How'd you handle it? And now as you're a coach, what would you have changed about how you handled it?
Yeah. Well, Albany had won their first conference championship the year before I got there. So when I got there, there was, an expectation. This is our conference. And that's just what you heard the older guys say. Like, this is our conference. It goes through us, and this is what we're focused on. Everything else is a buildup, to the conference. So, my freshman year was kind of like, that's just what the expectation was. And I just kind of went along with it. I got to play. I think I played in every game except for 1 or 2. Didn't have big minutes, but coach found a way to get me on the field, I think, just because I worked hard and I was scrappy. So that was the expectation. We got to play, I think, Syracuse in the NCAA tournament. We fell short, but it was a great experience. I just can't, we never got over the hump in my high school in terms of winning a championship. And then I came into a program that was winning. And again, we won in high school, but not a championship. And then I came to Albany, and it was like, all right, this is what you do here. You win. So I think that it was just the expectation. And then the sophomore year, it was the same thing. But we were talking maybe a little bit more about taking that next step. And we kind of ran into a buzzsaw of a Virginia team that year who was, incredible in the first round. We had a tough go down there in the NCAA tournament. But my junior year, I think we were 500, struggled a little bit. Just for whatever reason, the Jimmy and Joes didn't quite click. So we didn't make the NCAA tournament that year. And then my senior year, I remember my class was like this, and we sat down and we were like, we're not messing around. We are making a run. We're going to take the next step. The conference is ours. That's a given. And we had pretty steep competition, especially out of UMBC. They had a really good team that year. That year in 07, they made the quarterfinals. We made the quarterfinals. We had a small freshman class to manage too. We only had 5 kids to manage, and there was about 10 of us. And it was just known that we were going to take that next step. So we won the conference championship. We hosted a first-round NCAA tournament game, and then we eventually ended up losing to Cornell in the quarterfinals in a phenomenal game over at Princeton. So, what would I do differently as a coach looking back at it? I don't know that I would do that much differently. As an individual, I'd probably just shoot a little bit more because I just didn't have that scoring touch that those, Canadians did. And we played with a couple guys in Merrick Thompson and, Frank Rezateris, who both played, over in Ontario in junior A stuff. And, their scoring touch was superior to mine. I was more of a feeder and, I just didn't grow up with the amount of reps that those guys got playing box lacrosse. So if I go back and do anything differently, I would just shoot more and get more reps growing up, as opposed to, I guess, in addition to hitting the wall, which for me was always my main focus point was, all right, I'm going to distribute the ball. And so that's what I would do a little bit differently. But in terms of, what I walked into, I walked into a winning culture and a winning program and, a positive program and, coach that was going to kick your butt a little bit, but, he's also going to give you a big hug and tell you that he loved you. So, it was a great experience.
In terms of we'll go back to the things that a coach can manage, which is, some of the pregame preparation, travel, hotels, those type of things. Do you see anything? Was there any takeaways that you kind of remember that you think, what, when I get into this tournament, this is how I'm going to handle it with my guys? Because I know we're both coaches, and I know we're both of the philosophy that, we do got to let the guys enjoy it and have some fun, but at the same time, we got to temper it. So, it's a thing that I think about when I reflect on different events that you and I have been to, that I jot down notes afterwards going, what, I should have done this better. But 3 out of 4 years in the tournament, provides a whole different landscape for a burgeoning program that's going to try and get into it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think as a coach, you have to be your authentic self. And, for Coach Marr and Coach Svek and Coach Kiv, the guys they were their authentic selves. Like, I remember as a player, like, there wasn't much to it. We didn't have to think. It was one offense. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what was going on defense, but there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of thinking for us. We were, I'm not going to say we were all simple dudes, but, we were tough Long Island kids and, a couple Westchester guys and a Canadian or, Frankie Rez up there from Buffalo. And there wasn't a lot to it. It was, get the ball to the middies, dodge down the side, get it through X, and get the ball into Frank and Merrick. Like, there wasn't a whole lot to it. We all knew it. You know what I mean? We all understood our roles. So
play to strengths and see what happens.
There's no doubt. I mean, my philosophy from Coach Mars is probably a little bit different. I'm probably a little bit more, regimented, a little bit more structured, but, in that's just me being me. I can't be Coach Marr. I'm not as, kind of loose as he was. And not to say like he wasn't structured or disciplined. We were
just in his own way.
Yeah. I mean, he was going to be Scotty and I'm going to be Wolfie. We're just a little bit different. So, for me, I don't know that I would do much different. It worked for us. And I know it's worked for him over there for, over 20 years, and I try and, take what I learned from Coach Marr in terms of running a program. I always say for Scotty is just how he treats people. Everybody loves being in a room with him, and he's a good person and he cares about you, no matter what happens, on the field, that he's invested in you. So I've really taken that more so than anything from the Albany program.
So you graduate, you head to a year in the office, handling logistics and creating creating programs within the program, essentially, as a director of ops. You moved to Siena, and then you're back to Albany.
Yep.
So how many years was that?
1 year as director of ops at Albany, 3 years at Siena. So I guess 4 there. And then by my 5th year, I had gotten back at Albany. That was my first full-time gig. So I've been at it 4 years before I got, health insurance. Not that I was thinking about that at that time, but
Yeah.
That's the tough thing about coaching. There's no promise it's going to get you anywhere.
Well, going back to Albany, what was your biggest takeaway from the director of ops position and your experience at Siena? Where was your biggest area as a coach in terms of growth?
Yeah, under Coach Brecht, I learned how to hustle. I don't think we had all the bells and whistles, that you might see in some of the bigger programs, but we made it work. We just outworked people. So I really learned that, and I saw that in Coach Brecht, that he was in the first guy in, last guy to leave, practice plans, organization, discipline. And then I thought, myself and some of our other assistants, Craig McDonald, who's now an assistant at UMass, Liam Gleason, who is now the head coach at Siena, kind of brought that little bit of feel, culture vibe, which I thought meshed really well with Coach Brecht and his disciplined, regimented approach. So I certainly learned that, how to hustle, how to scrap, how to make, a dollar out of 50 cents, like just making it work. Then, when I got to Albany, it was more so, Coach Gary Denol, I remember he was kind of a mentor to the coaching staff. He's a legend in the Albany area, basketball and lacrosse. His sons played at Navy as well. We're out on the golf course one day, and, he told me, he said, Wolfie, it isn't always about the X's and O's as it is more so about the Jimmy and Joes. That's really what I thought I learned the X's and O's at Siena. I learned how to run a program. I learned discipline. I learned all that stuff. And then back at Albany, had been, struggling for a couple of years there in terms of, their standards and expectations. Jimmy and Joe weren't aligned. And for whatever reason, to nobody's fault, it is what it was. So myself and Coach Gleason and Coach Marr, I think we really sat down and just prioritized what was important for us and kind of getting the culture, to where it had been. And, I thought we did that under the guidance of Coach Marr, and obviously which was some incredible talent with, that first year at Albany, we were 0-7. We had Lyle Thompson, Miles Thompson, Ty Thompson, and Joe Rezateris. Like, we had crazy talent. Those are all guys who still play, professionally indoor.
Yeah. At a high level.
At a really high level.
Yeah.
Rezi's one of the best Americans, to ever play.
He was a real pain at the World Indoors this year. Like, he's a solid player.
Yeah, he's a handful. But not that those it's just our team. We hadn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't there. So eventually, we won a game, I think, and then we went on a run to the conference championship. And then after that, Scotty, he was a proponent of moving Lyle down to attack. I was like, I don't know, and I have never been more wrong in my life about anything. And then the rest is all she wrote.
Right. So I'm going to fast forward, and there's a structure to this of what I'm leading into, but you've got the Thompsons, you've got Joey Rezateris, there's a culture starting to really surround Albany, and a lot more, I would say, international media attention being focused on the program. And then you switch gears and go to Harvard.
Yep.
What was the biggest transition from, going into an Ivy League program in Boston to, or from, what you guys had built in Albany? Because there wasn't a day where, myself, I could go into Inside Lacrosse or go into Lax All-Stars somewhere, some sort of lacrosse media, and see something about Scott Marr, Lyle Thompson, Miles Thompson, something at Albany, the bow ties, the pictures, something like, and it was really cool. But then you go to a place that's a little bit stoic, a little bit more traditional. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was different. But again, I really wanted to be, my authentic self. And that's probably something that I struggled with at my time at Harvard. And the kids and people, what was it like? The kids aren't all that different. I think they're a little bit more analytical. They're a little bit more data driven. They want to be shown why. I always say, like, an Albany guy, a Siena guy, an LIU post guy. You tell them to pick a box up and put it down. They pick a box up and they put it down. A Harvard guy, they're going to want to know what's in the box and then how much further they have to move the box. Like they want just a little bit more information. And I was drawn to that. I was attracted to that because I've always kind of identified with that as well, just in terms of knowledge and growth. Like I like that thought process. So I think they probably push you a little bit more in terms of just being on top of your stuff. So I certainly enjoyed that. But in terms of motivating, those kids were the most self-motivating kids I've ever been around in my entire life. I mean, to get to Harvard, they've had to work incredibly hard. And a lot of them haven't been, they probably haven't made too many mistakes in their life. And that was something that I think we had to learn to grow as a group, was how to handle failing, how to handle adversity. Because to get to Harvard, you can't really screw up. And whereas me growing up, I was a habitual screw up. So, having made a lot of mistakes and being able to, address failure, I think I brought that value to that staff. So the culture, it was a little bit different, but I don't think the kids were all that different. They all wanted to work hard. They all wanted to win. That first year at Harvard, we made the Ivy League championship. We fell to a Yale team, I think, by 2 goals. And, we pushed them pretty good. And, the second year we had a little bit of a step back. And then, I moved on and everybody kind of went their separate ways. But I really liked my time. If I could go back and, do it all over again in my time at Harvard, I just probably would have been a little bit more truer to myself and just been myself and try and not make up for some things that I thought we were lacking, which kind of took me out of my groove a little bit, which I definitely think filtered through, the team and our success. I always look at it like, all right, why do we fail? Why did we have success? And what can I do to make it better? So that's kind of how I look at it.
Right. So then you land at LIU Post, traditional power school in the D2 lacrosse world. I don't think I ever beat them, that's for sure. But one of those teams that's perennially nationally ranked and aiming for a national championship. How do you think your continued education, your experience, how did that prepare you for day one? Eric Wolf walks onto campus and this team is yours.
Yeah. I mean, I think I saw, again, for me, coaching, it just always goes back to authenticity. I saw Coach Brecht at Siena, who I thought he wasn't mincing any words. He was going to be Coach Brecht. Scotty was going to be Scotty at Albany. Harvard, I kind of saw it a little bit in terms of maybe we struggled a little bit more with our identity and maybe being your authentic self. I know that I did. So I think, all right, when I get my chance, man, I'm going to be Wolfie. I'm never going to be like the hat on son. It's going to be like this because I told you that's just not my style. Like I'm going to be the same dude I am on this video. I'm going to be with my kids. Like I don't see it any differently. So I just try and be real with them and tell them, we set expectations, which for us, at that time was to win the national championship. I mean, there was no other expectations. It was, conference championship for sure. But the expectation is we're here to win the whole thing. So we laid down the goals. This is what it is. This is the how, and this is the why. And then we went from there and, that was certainly different. But my biggest thing, I was like, listen, man, I don't know how many shots I'm going to have at this thing. I'm going to be real. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to be authentic. And, I felt like I have been from day one. I really haven't, been anyone other than myself. And maybe that, rubs some people the wrong way sometimes, but so be it. You can't please everybody.
Yeah. So tell us about that first year. What was the goal, obviously going in as a national championship?
Yeah.
You've got, I took a look back at the rosters real quick because of course I've seen some players and I'm always on the look as well, but where do you think you fell short in terms of maybe growth and development, and where did you succeed? Maybe you overachieved in some areas.
Yeah. I mean, looking back at that first year, we had Connor Farrell, who's turned into a tremendous, professional lacrosse player at the faceoff position. And when I first got there, he was a stand-up neutral grip guy, which in the field game is it's pretty dated at this point. So he was struggling 50, 55%, but we got him knee down 4 games in, and that really changed everything for him. I think he ended the year at like 70%. And then the following year, he was 80%. Now he's playing professionally. So that was a lot of room for growth, a lot of growth there. offensively, I think we put up some pretty good numbers. Defensively in the net, we were consistent. We were solid. Where did we fall short? It's probably, just really in the playoffs for us, which was just winning that big game. We lost in overtime in the conference championship, and there weren't a whole lot of spots at the Division II level to get in. So, I thought we were in a position. I thought we were one of the best teams in the country. And at the end of the day, one team's going to score one more goal than the other. And unfortunately for us, we made a comeback. We pushed it to overtime, and then eventually we ended up losing in overtime. And we had a look. I remember that. We had a look. We missed the pipe by that much, and 3 inches the other way. Who knows? So.
And who that was against?
That was New York Tech.
Right.
The team next door. Listen, it was a great rivalry. I love playing those guys, but so we fell a little bit short there, and if I could go back and do anything differently, I look back, we put up points, we got stops, we won face-offs, we were in some great games, we put up some great numbers. We had the Rookie of the Year and Will Snelders. Kid put up a ton of points. He's on pace to break the all-time scoring record at Post. So, I felt pretty good about just establishing a base, treating the guys really well, and I was authentic with them. I was real. My style was a little bit different, probably a lot different than the previous regime, and to no fault of their own, it's just as different than my style. So I think that took a little bit of adjusting for our guys, where I was like, go, let's push it. Where when I got there, those D guys were getting to the midfield line, and they were like, can I cross the midline? I'm like, yeah, dude, go, let's push it. Yeah. So I felt pretty good about our first year. Again, we fell short of expectations, but unfortunately, at every level, there's only one team that's going home happy. So I felt like it was a good year. It was positive. We racked up a lot of wins, scored a lot of points, and, unfortunately, just we fell short. So
remember you and I were talking. Tell us about the whole how the merger, the push to – not the push, but the realization that you're taking the program to a Division I level, because I think when you and I spoke, that wasn't on the radar originally.
Yeah. I had, when I took the job, I had heard rumors about it, just through the lacrosse grapevine, but certainly wasn't a point of focus when I took the job. If it happened, great. If it didn't, I was perfectly content coaching at the Division II level on Long Island, where I grew up, and having my, a head coaching gig. I was all about it. Then when the announcement came out in the fall of my second year, I was like, all right, this is going to throw a wrench in some things. And, we're going to get everybody's best shot at the Division II level for sure, because everyone's going to want to knock you off. Not like, a bunch of kids from Long Island didn't already have that target on their back. We enjoy it and we thrive in it. It is what it is. But we really addressed it as a team, and we talked about, we're really not going to focus on next year. Our focus is on the day-to-day, the practice, evolving, getting better, competing for the ECC championship at that time, and then competing for the national championship. That was the goal. We're going out on top. We addressed it once, and I was like, listen, there's nothing really to talk about. When it comes to the end of the year, we'll talk about our plans moving forward, but that's not a point of focus. All we can focus on is what's within our control, attitude, effort, execution, and we'll take it from there. But it came out, we addressed it, we talked about it, and, and that was it. We put it to rest till the end of the year.
Okay. So I'm going to guess that was a conversation with the players.
Oh yeah. 100%. I was at the press conference in New York City that day. I got a call I think it was like 9:00 at night from my athletic director at the time. She's like, show up in my office the next day at 6:30 and be in a suit. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, am I in trouble? I'm like, all right, well, they're not firing me in a suit. So I'm like, all right, whatever. I didn't know what was going on. So I showed up, and then she told me, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I got practice. She's like, you ain't going. I'm like, okay. So I went to the press conference at some club in the city, and they announced it, and I'm there with a couple other coaches, and all the color. I'm like, oh man, this is happening. So they had the announcement. I saw what was going down, had a couple words with some administrators, and then I rushed back on the train. And then, they already heard about it. So practice, I told myself, I'm like, practice. We're not practicing.
Yeah. I
don't need to be there for you guys to practice. So came back, blew the whistle. I'm out there in a suit, and I brought him up, and I was like, all right, hey, literally we had that conversation because I had about 40 minutes to think about it on the train. And I was like, this is the deal. We're Division II this year all the way through. We're representing the green and gold and the Post Pioneers, and this is who we are. You know, when the time comes and our colors change and our logo changes, we'll take it there. But like for me and the alumni, it was really important to represent what has been built there, and it still is to this day, and not just, you know, kind of toss that aside, because there's a lot of people that came before me that built this thing into a perennial power, and I certainly didn't want to be, you know, the one to, you know, it's still important to me to honor those guys. And I know some of the alumni, listen, if, you know, if they changed your logo and your school colors, you might rub you, you know, the wrong way a little bit. So, you know, for us, it's been important to honor what those guys built. And we talked about that year. It was like, listen, we're going to go out swinging. So let's make sure we do this the right way, really, for all the alumni and the people that built this thing before us.
Yeah. So I just want to remind attendees, you got any questions, you got anything you want to throw into the Q&A box, please do it anytime. This is not a scripted or prepared interview by any means. Wolfie and I talked about 7 minutes before this whole thing started, and maybe a few text messages back and forth this month, but completely unscripted, just off the hip. We're going to be leading into a little bit more, and especially with the next question, because I'll lead in with that. So you've told the team, you're on the field, you're in a suit. You know, obviously things are going through your head, but you got practice. Yep. How did that change things for your staff? Because I know internally you can't go in and say, okay, we're preparing for D2 and we're doing everything. But, you know, as a staff and administration, you got to plan for next year. You know, you got to look at recruiting a little bit differently. So how did that change, maybe not the day-to-day, but the philosophy or even the job descriptions?
The biggest thing, and this is the number one question, the number one answer that I give when I was asked this question, is the number one thing that changes recruiting. The number one thing, the profile of the kid that we can get in front of, the family that we can get in front of, like to play at Division I, which is the highest level. Like there's no doubt that it is at the collegiate level. You know, we were able to get in front of a lot different caliber student athletes. So, you know, that's what I told our assistants. I said, listen, man, we were still recruiting kids we were recruiting, but we're gonna expand a little bit here and what we can get and what we feel like is gettable. I dressed them, you know. I think my assistants at the time had both played Division I lacrosse, so they were pretty in tune about, you know, what it took to play at that level. My assistant, Jimmy Montana, played at Quinnipiac, and my other assistant, Brendan Schroeder, had played at UMass. So they knew what it was like. But we talked about, you know, just the profile of the kid that we were going to go get. And I told them, we're not playing second fiddle to anybody. Like, we're going to go up again. I was like, we're going to lose a lot of battles, but make sure that we're in them. And don't go to a recruiting event and be like, you know, I said, find the best kid at the event and go after him. If he says no, he says no. But, like, you got to swing for the fences and try and get the best kids at the event every single time, which Division II, it's just not always the case. You're not going to get the best kid at those events because every Division I team has to miss, and then you still got to be the best at the Division II in order to get those guys. So, you know, that's really the biggest thing within my staff and within what we were doing is recruiting has changed, and it's still evolving because we're still trying to establish ourselves.
Yeah. So what was your mindset on, you know, you've got a current roster. There's been obviously some verbal commitments made in terms of bringing players into the program, but what was the mindset on keeping the players in current roster that you have, or essentially replacing some?
Yeah, I've been, I mean, it's a great question. You know, the guys that we had, I fell in love with my guys. So I certainly wasn't trying to push them away by any means. We'll ride this thing out. We're going to recruit every year. And I certainly don't want to be in a position where I got to cut guys. So, and a lot of guys that we had were, you know, borderline back-end D1 guys and high-end D2 guys. So we were, you know, I was confident that we were going to be competitive, and we still have a lot of those guys on the roster. So, you know, that's whether I did the right thing or not for the program in terms of skill and ability. I fell in love with my kids, so I didn't really care. You know, with that, we're going to bring in, you know, a bunch of talent at the Division I level, and we're going to keep evolving and growing the talent that we got. I don't look at my guys and see what we don't have. I look at my guys and be like, all right, where can we get them? How can we use them to put us in the best position to be successful on game day? So, you know, the recruiting landscape certainly changed, but I was not looking at my roster like, all right, we got to get rid of these guys. I literally, I think if you're going to be a successful coach, at least me, you have to fall in love with your kids. Like, you have to.
Yep.
And I've tried to do that every year. Whether they love me back, I don't know, but maybe some of them more so than others. But that's the goal for me, just because I just think when you love them up and you give them confidence, they're going to fight for you a lot harder than if you're motivating with fear.
Yeah. And I mean, that's you're working in two different directions for your staff. It's got to be a little not exhausting, but you're planning for a Division I debut the next season, but you're playing D2 that season. You're game planning, you're scouting. Obviously there's discussion amongst coaches of what the landscape is going to look like. What I'm very interested in is the recruiting events that you did go to that summer.
Yeah.
What was the reception like amongst let's go with peers?
I think the peers, everyone's fired up for us. Most of the coaches that you meet, it's a tight community. So I think people are really excited, and everyone's like, oh, D1. I'm like, we got to build it. Like I said, just because the label change doesn't mean we're ready. So everyone's like, you ready? And my answer was always like, no, we're not ready. But we're sure going to build, and we're going to try, and we're going to compete. So from our peers on the road, I think everyone was super supportive. And, it took a while though, like branding wise, like we didn't just have this, like it's like, all right, you went D1, we changed our logo, we changed our colors. We still had all our green and gold. I was wearing green and gold that whole summer. So everyone just word kind of goes around. So it's like, all right, word spreads. And then once we started to get our branding done, which happened, I think maybe in like August of that summer, we had a better plan for fall. I was like, any fall event that we go to, a lot of coaches will just stand to the side. They don't really want to be seen. I was like, make sure we are branded from head to toe. You walk by the bench every game, like pass them, let them see you. You can't talk to them. It's recruiting rules, but let them see you going one way. Let them see you going the other way. Every single team that you pass, and that will help spread the word because it'll spread like word of mouth. So they were like, oh, LIU. And that was the goal. It wasn't only just to get the kids. It was to spread the message and the branding that, we're here, we're an option. And I think now we've established that. I think within the lacrosse community, you don't have to kind of be like, all right, you're from where, you're who. And I think we worked pretty hard at that. And I think winning goes a long way with that. But it is also branding and marketing and getting your name out there. So it's an ongoing process for us. But, I come with a chip on my shoulder, just being a smaller guy. It's, whether it's Napoleon complex or not, I don't know. But, you always want to pick a fight. You always want to be the first one in there. I've always said, like, I'm the first guy getting in the fight, probably getting knocked out within the first 15 seconds. But when I come to, I'm going to be gnawing on your ankle. And then I'll work my way up. And I do think a team takes on the personality of a head coach. And, that's the way we try and play. And that's the way we try and recruit. I get told, we lose a lot. I lose a lot in recruiting. But you know what? We also win a couple that we probably shouldn't have won. And I think that is due to our attitude, is that we are coming out swinging. We are not going to, kiss the ring or bow down to anybody. We're in this thing to make a dent.
So how did you approach scheduling? Because you got a lot of options out there, and you've coached at some, pretty reputable institutions.
Yep.
Post has a great D2 name, always ranked, always, consistently. I won't say always, but consistently in the top group. And now you're D1. How do you approach that?
Yeah, scheduling was probably one of the hardest things that I had to do in terms of putting together a schedule in, I don't know, it was 2-3 months. We had to put together a D1 schedule, and I don't regret it. We worked really hard to get a Division I competition this fall, but we couldn't find anybody to play us. It just, I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe we were late to the table, so we couldn't get a D1 opponent. So we went into the spring without even playing a D1 team. And I was like, the whole time mentality is like, can we do this? And now we don't even have a test once we're in the spring. So that was a challenge. I'm sure we'll touch on that in a little bit, but I really looked at it regionally in terms of, all right, I want to play our local teams and I want to be in the conversation. So that when we do recruit, that hopefully one day we can say that we beat them or we were competitive, getting Hofstra on the schedule, getting a Wagner on the schedule, was in the NEC conference, St. John's, Quinnipiac, Fairfield, a lot of schools that were around us, teams that I thought we were going to bang heads with recruiting. We tried to do that. So it was a process, and we had a couple good scrimmages. We had Rutgers. It was Coach Brecht, who really threw me a bone. We were able to practice at their facility. Scrimmage at their facility, which was awesome. And then Keegan from Marist came down, and we had two great challenges, leading into our first game. And then one of my best friends, Liam Gleason, who's the head coach at Siena, we went up on the road and had our first game up there, which was really nice. The play wasn't great playing in the snow, but it was just nice that one of the guys, Coach Brecht and Coach Gleason were two instrumental people in my life, were able to kind of help me out, and we put together a full schedule that was leading up to the NEC conference, and that was really what we talked about all year, was every game and every practice is an opportunity for us to get better, to prepare us for the NEC. Same thing going back to Albany, like when I played. It's about the conference. Everything we're doing is about the NEC. Whether that puts pressure on it or not, it's just the reality. We got a one-way ticket, and that's through the NEC. So we want to have games, where we have some success, where we win a couple, but also maybe a little bit of a reach so we can see where we want to get to. That way, when we get to the NEC, we're feeling good about who we are as a group. And I felt like we were playing our best lacrosse. It's easy to say now that, nobody can check the games in terms of what happened in the NEC, but you talk to any of our guys, we were playing our best ball. Our attitude was in the right place, and we felt like we were going to be pretty competitive within the conference.
So, yeah, and you touched on it briefly. I was going to bring that up next. I'm trying to kind of progress on the timeline there, but you get back to school. Your branding's just launched. Basically, when school's starting, your branding kicks in. You're recruiting. You're essentially activating a D1 program. You're not starting from scratch, because you do have, like I said, you got alumni, history, tradition, albeit changed. But it's got to be different when you're bringing in a recruiting class that maybe the year before that you weren't really thinking of. So what does fall look like in terms of, did you sacrifice any team type stuff for individual development, or was it straight team stuff? What did the LIU fall look like?
Yeah. It just remind me of a quote. Coach DeLuca, who's now the head coach at Delaware, when we were assistants together at Harvard, I think it's a Bobby Knight quote: "Mental is to physical as 4 is to 1." So for us, we just talked about, all right, we have to make sure after this season. I remember at an end of the year meeting, when our season was over, we gave about a week. We brought the boys in. This is when, our last meeting as a Division II program. I said, we have to be right mentally going into this summer, so that next fall we are not getting in shape and figuring it out. These guys have to have a summer. So I hit them real. I'm a big believer in hitting people right between the eyes. Like, all right, let's give them a cold, hard truth. So the end of the year meeting kind of went like this. I was like, all right, fellas, in the past 2 years at the Division II level, we've come up short. We have not been good enough to reach our goal. Now we're going up a level where everything's going to get harder. So if you think that you're going to go home through the summer and do what you have always done, increase the level of competition, and that we're going to be successful, you're living a lie. And I remember that. I just let it like brew in there. Like, face it, it's going to be harder. Everyone's bigger, faster, stronger, and more skilled. There's no doubt. Like, it is. I can tell you, having done it. So I don't know that it was a little bit of fear, but it was reality. Right. So I really wanted to make sure that our guys were going to have a strong summer. I was like, take a couple weeks, get your legs underneath you, heal, recover, move past the last game emotionally. We had a pretty tough beat in our last game in the Conference Championship as well that year. But
I remember watching that one.
Yeah, it was brutal. I don't want to talk about that game. Right. No, we can talk about it. I'm just kidding. But I wanted to give them cold, hard facts, which was, it ain't working, and it's only going to get harder. And I don't want to say it ain't working. Like, we were close, but we didn't get to where we wanted to go. So now that it's going to be harder, we got to make sure that we're getting after it over the summer. So I thought our guys came back in tremendous shape. They were ripping and roaring, ready to go that fall. So I was like, all right, the message got through. These guys are with it, no doubt. Then I think we spent about the first 3 to 4 weeks kind of driving that message, like, not good enough. Let's go. Not good enough. And then we had to transition to a point mentally. Again, mental to physical is 4 to 1. Like, all right, now we need to start building some confidence. Like, because that was the biggest thing that I was concerned about mentally. Was we've always been a confident group. You put a bunch of Long Island dudes in a room, it's just going to be a byproduct of what you got. But it was, can we do this? Because they didn't know. they knew they could compete and be good at Division II. And we'd scrimmage a couple of Division I programs at Division II, the year before, and we've done okay. But now it's like, all right, we've kind of scared them a little bit. Now, how do we start building up their confidence? Because I'm all about feeling good going into the games. If you worked hard, you prepared, you've earned the right to be confident. So we started kind of changing that. I'm like, you guys can do this. We can do this. So we started building them up a little bit. As we progressed into the spring, when we got into the winter, like, we are good enough. We can do this. Stay the course. We can do this. Just over and over and over and over and over again. And then, the biggest, I remember, it was like the light bulb went off. We went to scrimmage Rutgers 2 weeks into preseason of the spring. And I think we scored the first goal of the scrimmage. I think it was like 2-2 or 3-3 at the end of the first quarter. I remember calling like timeout I think it was timeout. It was 3-3 in the first quarter. And I was like, well, can you guys play with them? They're like, yeah, and they're like, can you run with them? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, are they bigger than you? Are they faster? Are they stronger? They're like, no. And I'm like, well, they actually were, but they didn't need to. Yeah. But either way, I was like, I told you guys. So it helped to have a little bit of success, in that first half. Now in that third quarter, in that scrimmage, we took, they snapped back and they got us pretty good. And in the fourth quarter, we came back. But it was just great for us and I wanted that in the fall. Unfortunately, scheduling, we just couldn't get it done. But we had that scrimmage versus Rutgers, and I was like, all right, man, hey, maybe we can do this. And then the next week, we scrimmaged Marist. So, again, they got the better of us in the scrimmage. But, we hung in there. And I think we learned a lot from both of those scrimmages that we went into that first game and, we were ready to go. Now, the first game didn't really go according to plan in terms of how that game played out. But eventually, like all this stuff, we woke up and we made it pretty competitive.
Yeah. Well, let's give the attendees a little bit. We were talking about the conference championship, and we don't have to go into a whole much of detail on it, but emotional moments like that, when it's your last season at that level and you're fighting for something, you're right, it can take a toll on players. Why don't you give like a kind of quick overview, who you're playing, how it went down, and obviously we know how you moved on, but I think it's a great segue into mental abilities and strength of a player.
Yeah, I mean, the first year in the conference championship, I think we were down by like 2. I don't remember quite as well, but we came back, we tied it up. We went into overtime. I think we won the draw, came down, called timeout, offensive possession, drew something up. Kid got to the rack and he missed by like that much. Backed it up, had another possession. We ended up turning the ball over. They came down, called timeout, drew a play, and they scored. So that was, it was pretty emotionally brutal for us because we felt like we had a team to win the national championship. And I also felt like, the team we were playing was pretty good as well. And they were well coached. So that was tough for those guys, but we talked about it, breathe, process it. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt for a long time. But as time goes by, you'll move on. We'll look at this, we'll build from it, and we'll be better, for it next year. So, that year it was pretty brutal, especially for those seniors, who wanted it pretty bad. The last year, it was just as brutal, if not worse. We're in the conference championship. And there was actually some repercussions, which wasn't, we were supposed to host it. We were predetermined to host, I don't want to throw the conference under the bus, but we were supposed to host a predetermined event at LIU that year. And then when they heard that we were going Division I, they took the championship hosting from us. And I get it. They want probably the championship to be at an East, their conference school, in which we weren't going to be anymore. So I got it, but that was kind of a bummer for our boys, but comes with the territory.
Doesn't mean you got to like it.
Right. So, certainly wasn't happy about it. Not like we needed motivation to win, but it was what it was.
Yep.
So we're, going back and forth game, and it was versus Mercy, one of my best friends who I played with at the University of Albany, Jordan Levine. He's had a couple Canucks over there too.
Mixed badging.
Yeah. So it was a great game, back and forth, pretty much 1-goal game. I think we were up, they were up, we were up, they were up, and then we went up super late with like a minute left. And we had a face-off. We got a steal. We got to stop. We were up by 1. There was a minute left. We cleared it, bringing it down the side. We turned the ball over, getting it from one of our minis to our attackman, and then they clear it. We have 2 guys run to the box, which we never do, getting off from offense to defense. They could bring it up. They get it down to their attackman, and they get underneath one of our defensemen, and they score to tie it up with like I think 37 seconds left. So it was like, all right, we got to stop. We got to clear. We have the ball. I was out of timeouts, which kills me too, because I remember earlier in the second half, I had called timeout just as I called right before they threw a flag. So I was like, and then I had already called it. They threw the flag, and I wouldn't need to use it. So that still, bothers me to this day. But either way, I didn't have a timeout, and we turned the ball over. They came down, scored in transition, and then I was like, all right, let's rebound. Here we go. We got Connor at the X. It's been a weapon for us all year. He's incredible. He unfortunately violates. He never vios, and he vios on the next whistle. They come down, same thing, same kid. Banged it down to that kid. He got underneath, and they scored, and they went up with, I think it was like 10 seconds left or something like that. So it was like game in hands. We had it, and same things like 2 years in a row, just kind of slipped away. So that was devastating for us, for the boys and stuff like that. And for me, after games where I was just like, I didn't feel anger. It was hard to process, and I know a lot of my kids were, because it's so finite for them, whereas it isn't for us because we get to come back. So it took me a while to process it, to move on, to move forward. But, when you zoom out, I was just so proud of, each one of those teams, just in terms of how much growth we had, culturally, in doing the right things, and, being a team that wasn't about this. We were about that. And, so we've been pretty close, but like I said, into the team at the end of the year meeting, we fell short of our goals, and we had to face it. I'm a big believer in cold, hard truths, but also following that up with a path for success afterwards. So, that's kind of how the last two championships went.
So, and that's right, because it comes down to framework and how you're framing that for the players going into the off season, coming back as a D1 program. And obviously it's an elevated level of play, elevated level of commitment, academically, athletically. You're preparing yourselves. Fall's done. Christmas break's over. You're back. You're ready to go. So on a day-to-day basis, what was the biggest issue on the transition for, to D1 for you as a coach and the players?
To be honest with you, I don't really think the commitment is any different from Division II to Division I. I guess it depends on what program you're at. We didn't change anything on a day-to-day basis in terms of our work. Time spent at the wall, time spent shooting, time working on your footwork, film, like nothing really changed for us. The biggest challenge was mental. It was the biggest challenge was, and our guys aren't sitting there like, can we do this? But you just sense it. Do we belong? Do we belong here? And we just kept, trying to give them confidence. I'm like, fellas, I've done this for over, 12, 13 years of my life. It's all I've ever done. Your assistant coach here, Jack Runkle, won a national championship at Loyola as a starting goaltender. Your other offensive assistant, the offensive coordinator, Tim Rotance, 5 Final Fours and won a national championship in 2017 at Maryland. Connor Farrell is the baddest dude on the planet. Like, if you're not feeling good, look at us, because we feel good. We believe in you. We can do this. Now let's go there and let's get to work. And that was everything that we talked about. Like, just get lost in the work, fall in love with it, and the results that you want are eventually going to come. It wasn't, and I knew I couldn't really push a result-driven, message, because I didn't know how quickly they were going to come, if they were going to come. But I thought that might be a little bit too daunting for them. So for us, in this philosophy I believe in is, you're going to get the results you want if you put in the work and you prepare for it. Eventually it's going to come. And that was a big part of our film sessions on Mondays. I think I said it to you earlier offline, like, this was the best coaching year of my career by far. Because it wasn't about the wins and losses. Every game I'd sit in the, I'd go, hey, did we get better that game? And every game outside of one game versus our Hofstra game, which I don't think we got better, did we get better? And the answer was always yes. So then we go out to practice on Monday. I was like, all right, like, we're getting better. We're not getting the results we want, but hey, man, we're not far off. Stay the course. We're getting better. We're closing the gap every game. We're going to get there. And eventually, we did get there. We beat Quinnipiac at home for our first win in Division I. It's like 13-8, 13-9 or something. We did end up zoning them for 60 minutes, but whatever you got to do. And then, we were pretty close to Fairfield. We had UMass on the ropes, who had just beaten Yale. We were up on them late in the fourth quarter, but we just kind of ran out of gas. So, we really felt going into the conference play that, not only did we belong. I remember that at halftime at UMass, we were up. It was tied 5-5. And I was like, What'd I tell you? What did I tell you guys? And they're like, I'm like, do you belong? They're like, yeah. And it was the same thing as Rutgers. Like, can you beat? I'm like, can we do this? They're like, yeah, let's go. And we talked about it all the time, like, throw the first punch. Every game we talk about throwing the first punch. And then, we talk about if you don't throw the first punch, make sure you get up off the mat and throw it anyway. But we talked about it coming out of that second half into UMass. We were like, throw the first punch, throw the first punch, throw the first punch. And we came out, I was like, whack, whack, whack. We scored the first like 2 or 3. And, we had them calling timeout. And some, one of my best friends, Craig McDonald, coaches over there. And Doc Schneider, Coach Cannell is a legend. Like, so grateful that they gave us the opportunity to play there. That was actually the last game before, COVID set in. But, where it came from going back to the summer was, kind of, hey, man, you better get to work or else. To the fall, we can do this. To Rutgers, see, and then, took a couple L's, took a couple bumps along the way. And then whereas we beat Quinnipiac and then we felt like we had UMass, we were in a position going in the conference where we were like, hey, man, like there was no doubt anymore. It was almost like we were back to Division II, not really feeling, do we belong? Like, this is how we do it. This is our recipe. And is it the recipe that we want? Probably not, because we just really struggled at the faceoff X again, I'm not putting it on any of my guys, but we were at a 70-30, possession deficit every game. So we had to get stops. We had to clear efficiently. And we had to muck it up in between the lines and be super efficient on offense. But we felt like we had just really evolved, culturally, and just mentally.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna back up. I mean, we don't have a lot of time left here, but I'm gonna back up to the Siena game. So it's your first game. You're on the road.
Yep.
They open up the scoring. You close the gap. It's 2-1. Then they kind of go on a run. I think it was about halfway through the second quarter. You guys pretty big 7 or 8-1 deficit.
Oh yeah, that was brutal.
What was the message there to get the players back on track to revisit those Rutgers feelings of not, I think it was 10 days between the two.
Yeah.
So what was the message? Because I'll let the viewers know, like that ended up being a 14-12 game.
Yeah. We were nervous, man. I wasn't, I know like sometimes going to a game, I wasn't nervous. I felt really confident that we were going to be successful. But we played tight. We weren't physical. We were passive. It was the kind of like, I don't know if I should go it was just thinking, So yeah, we went down. So at halftime, that was a shred sesh, not like, what are you guys doing? It's like, let's go. Like, I don't care what the score is. Let's punch some people in the mouth. Let's fight. Let's just fight. That's what it was. Whether they respond to that or not, I don't know that they did, because they scored a bunch more in the third quarter too. But I think like you were saying, we were down 8-1, and I think in the second half we went down like 11-4, 11-3. It would have been very easy for our group to pack it in. And I give my group credit, and I think that part of it is the way we treat them and the way we coach them and that we build them up. It's never, what are you doing? You guys, like, it's never that. It's always we can do this. Let's do it. Stick together, all that. And it's not always rainbows and butterflies. Like, it's okay, Timmy. Like, it's not always like that. But we got after them in halftime, and then eventually they just, they took their mitts off and they started swinging. And then we had all the momentum, and we had the opportunity. Same thing. We had the ball, I think 2 or 3 shots to tie the game, and we just felt like we were going to win the game. And then, we weren't able to put the ball in the back of the net. And then eventually we just played so much defense because of, just losing at the faceoff X. That game, we were able to win a bunch of faceoffs because we mucked it up with our D guy, and he had a huge game scoring offensively. We did some, substitution stuff, and it was great. But the same thing at the end that I told the guys, I'm like, did we get better? They're like, hell yeah. I'm like, can we do this? They're like, let's go. And the kids, they wanted to strap up and play again right there. But it was, we don't, I'm not going to mourn it. I'm not going to sit there and feel sorry for ourselves. We gave it away. We gave that game away. If we would have played that way for 60 minutes, and that's always the challenge, playing a full 60 at the same attitude, the effort, and execution, and then being able to rebound and react when it doesn't go your way. So, I felt walking out of that game, it didn't feel like I lost. I was like, oh, we're not far off. Like, I know Siena. I grew up here. I know my bud. I know how good they are, and we were pretty close.
Well, really, you weren't far off at all. I mean, I wish I had it up. Overtime loss the next game, or a 1-goal loss, or 2-goal.
Yeah, I think it was overtime, and we had that. Had that game
overtime to Wagner. 2 goals to St. John's, I think.
Yeah, same thing. We struggled. We're still trying to find our identity offensively versus Wagner. Struggled at the X. Our goalie was tremendous. We had the number one statistical most saves per game in the country. Will Mark was tremendous for us as a freshman. And we also had the number one scoring freshman in the country at the other end, Richie Lacalandra. So we felt like we had some talent. But yeah, Wagner overtime. We had the game. Richie, called timeout. The game was tied. Out of the timeout, Richie goes flying. It's on our Instagram. It was just literally like Air Richie. He went flying through the air, scored, stayed out of the crease. Again, we lost the faceoff. They came down, made a play out of a timeout. They came down in overtime and, called the same exact play, and we adjusted, but we didn't execute. We ended up losing the game. St. John's, we went down big in the second half. They were pretty, potent offensively. But same thing. We came back. I think we got it to within 1, maybe 2 goals. And again, when you in the field game, when you are losing the ball, like we lost it at the faceoff X, it just makes it really difficult to come back because of how much energy you have to exert to get it back. Whereas in the box game, the shot clock's much quicker. You're pretty much guaranteed possession. It's still a lot of time, within the field game, which hopefully they'll make some changes to here coming soon. But we just felt like we've always had a resilient group that it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter if it's sexy. We're going to scrap and we will go down swinging. And I think, if anything, when teams talk about us, they're talking about, those guys are tough. And I hope that's what people, say about us. Not like I put all that much stock in when people, talk about us. But,
Gotcha.
we try to be about it, not talk about it.
So D2's gone. You lose some regional rivals pretty quick because you're not in D2 anymore. So New York Tech's kind of out the window. Adelphi's out the window.
Yep.
You got a couple other D1 programs on the island, and one of them on your schedule, and you face them next. Is Hofstra going to be the next New York Tech rivalry type game? Is that?
Well, I mean, I always say rivalries, you got to beat them to make it a rivalry. And for us, unfortunately, that was the only game we didn't show up. We showed up in the first quarter, but for whatever reason, that was a game where I don't think we got better.
Right.
I think they were one of the better teams on our schedule, but I don't think that they were like that much better than us, for us to play like we played. A lot of it, we were trying to, we played freshmen all over the place. So we were trying to figure it out on offense. We were trying to figure it out on defense. We were trying to figure it out at the face-off X because, parts of our group came back, but a lot of it was new. And a lot of those guys were Division I recruits that were, and part of that is the draw of LIU. You want to come in, you want to play right away, you're going to have to compete, but it's not like you're dealing with 4 classes of Division I recruits. And no disrespect to the guys that I have on my team. They're phenomenal. But it's a little bit different when you are building. So, I hope that, Hofstra can turn into a rivalry. And I was on a call with Coach Tierney this morning and Coach Miller at St. John's. And, there's another school on Long Island that we would love to play, but for whatever reason, it hasn't worked out. So, we're trying to build that. We got Wagner. Love to, maybe get Manhattan on there and we try and play those, Northeast teams and get something going because I just think it's good, for lacrosse and it's good for the island. We're certainly excited about it. And, as we build and we grow and we bring in these recruiting classes, we're going to be more competitive because at the end of the day, you cannot do anything without talent.
Well, listen, man, I promised you this would be an hour. I think there was a lot of great takeaways from this, especially for coaches that are building their programs and starting their programs. If anybody's got a last cue for Wolfie to put the answer to, throw it in the box. It's been pretty informative. Obviously it's great catching up with you. You and I talk fairly consistently. So, but not on these levels. I think last time we were able to talk this much lacrosse was probably in Netanya.
No doubt. No, it's great. This has always been my life, my passion, and, people have been great to me in terms of, providing opportunities and sharing knowledge. And that is, something that I believe in. If you take anything away from this is just be authentic, be who you are, be yourself, and I think guys will get behind that. If you BS them and you try and be something you're not, they're going to see you right through you and they're not going to follow you.
Nice. Listen, Wolfie, I'm going to thank you. We're going to end it right there. You and I'll be chatting with you fairly shortly here. Okay.
All right. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks everyone. Take care.
All right. See you guys.